Perfect. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's session. Thank you for joining us for, we're saying the last installment of the AI series, but I suspect that we'll be seeing a little bit more coming down the road this year, just as things continue to progress. But before we get started this morning, I would like to acknowledge that the land we identify as RTO9 is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Huron-Wendat peoples. RTO9 honors the land, the people, and the treaties, recognizing the original guides of these territories and their enduring contributions. As treaty people, we all share the responsibility to uphold these agreements in a fair and respectful way. As a partner of Indigenous Tourism Ontario, RTO9 is committed to supporting the Indigenous communities by creating space for their stories and helping foster socioeconomic growth through tourism. Just a couple of housekeeping notes that you probably hear at every session. This session's being recorded. It's going to be available for viewing after the session today on the RTO9's website. It's just rto9.ca under the resources tab. There's opportunity to ask questions, so feel free to pop into the Q&A box or the chat, and Elaine will get to them as she goes through the presentation. You're going to receive an email following the session today. It's going to include a copy of the recording, as well as a 2-minute survey link if you have some time to review the workshop. We'd really appreciate that. And now, without further ado, I'm going to pass it off to our lovely facilitator this morning, who's ahead of the curve, Elaine Alexander.
Hello, I'm going to share my screen. And we have one person here today, hopefully a few more join. But Brittany, can you pop in the chat? I see that you're in consulting. What kind of consulting do you do? And then I'm going to get started just so that we can really focus. All right, so AI at work, creating practical policies for your team. This is such an important topic. It will become a even more important topic when Meg and I were talking earlier in the year. I believe even last year, we were talking about how AI policies will become as important as privacy policies. But as Meg said, we are ahead of the curve. Not a lot of people are thinking about this. But as AI enters more and more of our work, trust will be really something that people will struggle with AI, especially. And so AI is already in your business. You're probably using it for marketing or drafting social media content, visitor guides, guest emails, anything that we have covered in the last 7 sessions, right? It is entering all of these different areas, and people are really wondering what was created by AI. And not having those policies for your team can really create some risk. And so, as I was mentioning, even with my husband's company, he works in tech and they don't have a AI policy as well. And so it's becoming something that he's even pushing for. So Brittany says we deliver an Employment Ontario contract for integrated services. Amazing. Support job seekers, employers with all things. Um, Perfect. Excellent. Okay, so um, it is something that is entering all the sectors of work, right? I've seen it with hiring as well and job seeking as well. So when we don't have a policy, it creates really big risk. I'm Elaine, and I'm an ethical AI strategist and coach. I'm also a therapy student, so I'm a registered psychotherapist qualifying. I'm married to a tech geek. I have a 4-year-old, and so I'm an older mom, and I've traveled around the world. And you can find me at elainealexander.com. And so every business needs an AI policy. This is something that we're going to see more and more, especially in the next 2 years. There was the push years ago when legislation came out around email compliance and PIPEDA and Castle in Canada. And Canada has not written any formal legislation, but there's a huge push this year for a number of reasons. And so 77% of employees are using AI with no guidance from their employer, which can be a little scary, and I will give examples of why that's scary. But there is some legal compliance and exposure risks. There's client privacy. I was telling Meg that I am doing an AI boot camp this week, and the level of information that they're giving to AI is a little scary. And so I always take the perspective of no client data, no emails, no identifying information ever given to AI. I'm a therapist, so I have an extra responsibility, and I always approach AI with that in mind. Copyright and IP ownership is really unclear right now. So I taught at a conference last November, and one of the questions was, well, I'm using AI to create my IP. Is it still mine? And right now, no one has that answer. It's still going through the courts. It's still, as humans, we learn through consequences, and we are learning through consequences right now. And so if you're creating something with AI, it is pulling from somewhere, and it could very well be copyrighted or trademarked by somebody else. And we don't know. We have to do that research after we create something, right? And it also creates a risk for your brand reputation. When you are not transparent about your AI use in your business, people will lose trust. A bunch of, I see it online every single day. And especially, I'm also finishing my master's, so I see it on the school perspective, and there's a lot of finger pointing or accusations about using AI as well. And when we are not transparent about what we use AI for, it decreases trust. And trust is hard to earn and really, really easy to break. And so having a policy brings that clarity both for your employees, for your team, and for your clients or customers. It makes that clear, and it increases trust. So there was a story last November of, and Deloitte has actually been in the papers twice, once in Australia and once in Newfoundland. And so Deloitte was paid $1.6 million to generate a report, a healthcare report for the government of Newfoundland. And half the citations were hallucinated, and hallucinated in this case means that they were made up. So if you clicked the research and the links, it did not exist. The authors, sometimes AI will pull a research that sounds good, but doesn't actually exist. And so that's what happened here. A lot of the research was made up. And when we use AI and we're trying to prove a point, it's going to try to help. It's a people-pleasing machine. So it's going to try and help us, but it does not mean that it's real. And so we need to be careful. And this, I think, is what is one of the cases that's going to push more and more for AI regulation in Canada. We've tabled it, but I think it's going to come back this year. There's more and more popping up in news stories. There was also a doctor who used an AI note taker who logged in, and he was no longer at a hospital. His AI note taker logged in and took a bunch of notes. No one noticed, and then it emailed a whole bunch of people after that it shouldn't have. And so we're going to see these kinds of things happening more and more in the world, and that's what's going to push, those consequences are going to push the regulation. And when that happened with privacy policies, then every company needed one after that. And so AI policies will be a thing this year. So there's four big risks for small businesses, right? So privacy, so guest data in AI tools creates exposure. We're unsure legally about copyright and IP. Accuracy, it can sound really, really confident and wrong. And we don't know. So always fact check different things. I even fact checked all of the stuff in this presentation just to make sure that we were getting the information right. And then your brand voice as well. So one of the things that we're seeing, especially in social media, is very beige, very similar social media. So it defaults to generic, it flattens out the edges, it makes it very beige. And so making sure that it is still carrying your voice and your values of your business is super, super important. And if you employees don't have guidance on that, they're just going to use it and they're fulfilling their role, right? If you tell them post 3 times to social media this week, they're going to do that in the fastest way possible, but it may not be the quality that you used to have or the brand voice that you used to have. Your risk is lower in certain things, so, but there's always risk. So drafting social captions is a little bit less risky, especially if you're training it, you're using either custom GPTs or skills in Claude. Um, if you are writing trip itineraries and internal documents, researching travel trends, brainstorming campaigns, responding to FAQs, but all of this needs human oversight. And that is the part that a lot of people aren't talking about in AI, right? Sometimes AI does not create efficiency. I think that sometimes it can take longer. I like AI because it solves the blank page problem. It gets us started or it adds the polish, right? It can be good at, I'm not great at hooks or CTAs, so it will do that for me. But I always need to pick the best one and look at things. So often using AI is not the productivity hack that we think it is because it is going to need some double checking. But where I like it is that it will get you started on things that you've been avoiding. It will, often the hardest part is opening the document and just writing the first sentence, and AI will do that for us so that we can get going. But then we need that human oversight. So where humans must lead is in guest complaints and really sensitive issues. That's where human judgment is so, so important. If you have a policy on how you handle things, then you can give that to AI and it will respond accurately. But you need to give it to that instruction and those policies. The accessibility and safety of information, you are always, always accountable. And so if you are giving client data, that's a huge risk. And I definitely say not to do that. There are, people are looking for those ways to be efficient. And so somebody might upload something on your team thinking that they're going to save time, but it opens you up to risk. Culturally sensitive content is really, really important. Relationships cannot be outsourced. And then any published pricing hours review before any facts, any data, because it is programmed on the assumption that it's always going to guess. And so AI is not going to say, I don't know. It is programmed on the idea that if it guesses, it's like multiple choice exam, it might get it right. And so always check the facts, always check the data. And those are guidances that we need to explore with our team so that they are very prepared for, a lot of people don't know that AI makes things up. A lot of people don't know that it is a people-pleasing validating machine, and so it's going to make up sources. I see it in my master's program all the time. People are posting links that don't exist. And sometimes we are looking for those efficiencies and we hook up systems that we should not be hooking up. So what do good AI policies look like? And the government of Canada has come out with 6 principles. It's called FASTER. So it's fair, accountable, secure, transparent, educated, and relevant. And so I'll go through the 3 key ones of that. Transparency is so, so, so important. So identify content that's produced with AI. We are seeing more images and video created with AI, and labeling it with AI is going to become even more important. Anything that's flagged is going to work against you. And so we will trust things when we label them as AI way more. Notify guests or clients when they're interacting with an AI tool, right? And sometimes AI has a use and sometimes it doesn't. AI is trendy. And so I'll tell this story. So I went to buy a car in March, and the finance manager asked me a bunch of questions. And, he's been doing this job a really, really long time. And so he said, well, let me come back. I'm going to input this information into AI and it's going to spit out a bunch of recommendations. And it was fancy and trendy, but it actually lowered trust because I wanted his expertise. He'd been doing this for 20, 30 years. I wanted him to tell me what I should do, not an AI tool. And so sometimes AI is going to actually decrease the trust. And we need to be super transparent about that. Now, because I knew what he was doing, he told me he was putting it into AI. And so that's an important part of that trust and that relationship and that accountability. Um, the next key requirement is being accountable. So take responsibility for AI generated content, ensure it's accurate, legal, ethical, and always establish oversight. The report that Deloitte created, they needed to refund half the money. And so you cannot hand over something to the government that's not real or accurate or ethical and just get paid. And so we need to always take responsibility for anything that's created, and that includes copyright. When it is pulling from the internet, we don't know if somebody else has trademarked that. And so doing our due diligence after that is super important. And I remember my first business after just recently, so 18 months ago, I left a contract and I decided I needed to pivot. And so I asked AI for a list of business names and it came up with one. And I went with it for a couple months and then I found out it was trademarked in the US. And so it is giving us all the same answers. And so we need to look at, is this owned by somebody else? Has somebody trademarked this? Is this copyright? Can I use this? Is this fair use? We need to look at that and be accountable for the information. And then is it secure? So does it protect personal information? Is it PIPEDA or a CASL or a HIPAA compliant? And a lot of us have very sensitive data. So we are going to need to assess that privacy risk. But that is, as employers, as founders, as small business owners, that is our responsibility. So if one of our employees, somebody on our team is creating things, then we need to make sure that they are treating that data as securely as they did before AI. And really thinking through what systems we are hooking up and what data we are giving is going to be really, really important this year. We've all made mistakes, we've all overshared, and there will be like a rebalancing, right? The pendulum sometimes swings too far one way, and then we need to go back. So there is a policy gap in Ontario tourism. AI is rewriting how travelers are finding or booking their trips, but the tourism sector doesn't have a policy yet. And quite honestly, very few companies do. I had to do a lot of research on which ones did. And so TIAO's Tourism Opportunities Forum did identify that AI is reshaping, but they have not created any guidance. Every governing body, every different organization in Canada is struggling with this year, and a few have come out with guidance. As a therapist, my college has come out with a little bit, and then they acknowledge that the laws were written before AI, and so there is some actual regulation and laws that need to be updated, and they only have so much power is probably the wrong word, but they only have so much recourse. And that, legal, some of these laws were written a long time ago and need to be updated. And we'll probably go through that in the next year or two. Destination Ontario's already adapting AI generated search results. And the sector is moving really fast, but the policies are dragging behind a little bit. That doesn't mean that you don't need one, though. So, what Ontario does have is a trusty AI framework. And so there's three principles. No AI in secret. So again, that transparency, AI that people can trust, which is really, really important. I think we're in a trust recession, and I think trust is actually going to decrease a lot this year. And so when we are transparent, people can actually trust us more. And then AI for all Ontarians. They've also introduced a responsible use of AI directive. And so it's not binding, but for small businesses, but ministries are bound to this. So they must assess risk, disclose requirements. There's 6 principles. So the principles are: AI is used for the benefit of the people of Ontario. So consider who's affected, account for diverse needs, share the benefits, and mitigate risks. AI use is justified and proportionate, and AI systems are reliable and valid. And so we're seeing this already, right? Hallucinated facts, research that doesn't exist. And so we need to keep AI in check. And yes, there is a place, but it is also a tool. And we can use a tool for good, and we can use it for not so good. And so making sure that it has a defined purpose, it fits with what we're doing, and we ensure that it is appropriately used as intended. AI is used in a safe, secure, and privacy protective way. So we've gone through this a number of times. All the policies are going to talk about this. And so safety, protecting the data, minimizing risk, minimizing breaches as well. We haven't dealt with that yet, but I think we will see it more and more this year. AI uses human rights affirming and non-discriminatory. So respecting equity, the Charter of Rights, making sure that it is inclusive design, and there is no language that is, inappropriate, especially with AI chatbots, making sure that the responses are, non-judgmental, they're including diverse backgrounds, all of those kinds of things. AI use is accountable and responsible. So we're seeing this again, making sure that there's human oversight, there's accountability for AI collected data, and readily available processes for the public to raise concerns, right? Oh, I forgot the picture there. Sorry about that. The Office of the Privacy Commissioner. So the OPC advises businesses to comply with Canadian privacy laws when collecting, using, or disclosing personal information. That hasn't changed. We're just looking at a different system, and that system is hooked up to a lot of data right now, which is adding a level of risk. So what should your AI policy include? So there's six things that I found that your AI policy should include. So the first is a purpose statement. So why your business has this policy and what it's designed to protect. So is it designed to protect employees from making mistakes? Is it to be transparent with your clients about where it's being used? Is it like, what is the purpose? The list of approved tools. And this will change a lot. We're seeing more and more tools come on the market. Everybody is switching. So in one weekend, 1.6 million people switched from ChatGPT to Claude, mostly based on ethical concerns with a deal that OpenAI did with the US government. And a bunch of different things, but adding an approved tool, especially if you are paying for tools for your team, for your employees. And so making sure that some tools are not permitted as well. And that list is going to change and grow as well. So the permitted and prohibited uses are going to be important. Clear examples of acceptable tasks and where AI is not appropriate. So my husband is an AI fan, but even he is looking at, you know what? we should not hook up to AI to coding and let it change things on its own. And so in his work, he has taught his people to always have it prompt before it asks, or prompt and ask if it can make a change before it makes that change. And so looking at those safeguards and those guardrails, super important. Data and privacy rules. So when information can be entered into AI and what can't, right? So addresses, credit card information, client names, email addresses, any kind of health data, any kind of private information should not ever be entered, and really looking at the tools, the compliance, where's that data being stored, being able to answer all of those questions if your clients do ask is really, really important. Disclosure and transparency. So when staff must disclose that AI was used to clients in publications and deliverables. I was speaking at a conference last week, and there was an author there, and she said that when she uploaded her new book to the publisher, it asked her if AI was used in any of the production of that book. And it said it wasn't going to hold her accountable, but it wanted that transparency. And so I think that will increase as we go along this year. And then review and accountability. So who owns the policy, how often it's reviewed, and how staff report concerns. And just because you create a policy, again, I forgot the picture, so sorry. Again, if just because you create a policy doesn't mean that it is static. It is something that should be reviewed over and over and over again. So the 3-layer check would be private or sensitive data. Yes, stop, don't enter it. Anything that's guest facing or published needs that human review. And then anything that needs professional judgment, AI can assist, but you always make that decision. I'm just going to stop for a moment. Any questions so far? I know I've thrown a lot at you so far. Any questions on AI policies? There we go. None so far. Awesome. And we do have somebody else joining us, so that's good. Is this something that should be reviewed by a lawyer? Yeah, I have a lawyer review all of my contracts and that kind of stuff. So once you review your policy, it's definitely a good idea. There's some services that don't cost a whole lot, but it's definitely something that I would have at least the first draft reviewed, and then you're good. This will be something that we'll need to update as we go along, but I'm never going to say no, it shouldn't. Absolutely. If you can afford it, if it's quick and easy and cost effective for you to do, absolutely. And also, even if it's not, it's something that you need to consider, because losing a client's going to cost you more. Right. So sometimes investing a few $100s to have somebody look over it is going to save you thousands in lost revenue, and lost trust, and lost clients and customers. So it's something that should be reviewed at least quarterly, and that grows as you go. So here's the sample AI policy and the purpose. So this policy helps our team use tools in ways that protect our clients, upholds our values, meets our legal obligations. And this is where reviewing by a lawyer will just add to that policy. The list of approved tools and the list of tools that are not approved. And that will change really quickly. Never use AI, or never enter any of this information into an AI tool. So list the information that's private and should never, ever be added. So client names, identifying information, payment information, any kind of addresses, login, credentials, passwords, any of that stuff. Any client-facing content. So a human review is required for all of these things. So published materials, anything on your website, anything in your brochures, pricing, hours, safety, anything that's client-facing always needs to be reviewed. And then disclosure. So when AI is used to draft. So adding a line at the bottom of certain documents saying AI was used for this will actually increase trust eventually. People are really weary of it right now. So disclosure is going to be even more important because people are always thinking now, and I've done it too. I've watched a video and then realized, oh, this is AI. And so when we label things with AI, it will help increase trust. Canadian AI policy. So here's a list of all the things. I just pulled it in one slide if you want to look at the different policies that I just went through. So Government of Canada, Office of Privacy Commissioner, the Government of Ontario's Responsible Use, and then the Trustworthy AI Framework from Ontario as well. These are all the sources that I looked at. Now, there are two examples that I found. Microsoft has a responsible AI standard. And so there's 6 principles. It's publicly available. It's fairness and reliability, privacy by design, transparency required. There's an annual report published, and it's really been used as a global template. So you can find it here at this link. It was really easy to find. I just typed in Microsoft AI policy, and it popped up right away. And they were really one of the first to write an AI policy. And the first company in Canada to write an AI policy was TELUS, and they have a really good one. I went and looked at it. They were the first one to sign it. It's privacy by design certified, human oversight is required, all of the things that really need are required in a good AI policy. And they didn't wait for regulation, they just created one. And I think that we need to be ahead of the curve on this. The more that we are transparent about our AI use, because we're all thinking that everybody is using it. So when we do say that we are using it and here's how we don't use it, that creates trust. And trust is the foundation of companies, right? I have a sales background. I used to do a lot of sales coaching, and trust is the very first step. If we don't trust a company, we will not buy from them. And it's a step that most companies skip or assume. And this will be an important topic this year. So the big picture is the biggest risks are privacy, accuracy, and copyright. That's where we can really fall into some AI traps. Um, we are really also needing to look at any kind of regulated rules. So if you're a regulated operator, the regional rules still apply, and really look at your governing body. They will probably update. More and more AI policies will come out this year. And then start simple, have one, and then review often. It will give your team guidance, and you are still responsible for all of the things that your team uses and creates and publishes. And so it will, that clarity for your team is so important. It will just make things easier. So would you recommend making your AI policy public facing? Absolutely. I think that this year at the bottom of your website, you'll have a privacy policy, you'll have an AI policy right beside it. More and more companies are adding it to their contracts, what they use in it. But yes, your AI policy should be on your website. It was super easy to find Microsoft and TELUS, and adding that transparency will be really, really important. So I see a whole bunch of apps coming out too on writing AI policies, just like privacy policies. So that will be a big thing this year. All right. I ran through that really fast. It is not the most fascinating topic, but it's really, really important information.
I was going to
Anybody
say
have any?
it's going to be even more important the longer we go on and the more
Yes.
that people are using AI. I think you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of it's going to be a big issue later this year.
Yeah.
I did have a question for you.
Cool.
So we're going to have a public facing policy on the website, just like a privacy policy, or in our case, we have a social media policy as well, just to
Yeah.
say, here's how you can behave on our social media platforms. Should you have an internal policy that's a little
Yes.
bit more practical and hands-on for staff?
Yes. Yeah, I think the client-facing one does not need the level of detail that the employee one needs. The employee one definitely needs to have more detail on what the processes are, what the policies are, what you can and can't do, and then having a transparent one on your website. So I think two are going to be really important. If you don't have any employees, um, then the client facing one is fine. But the clearer you are with your team, the less your risk is, right? And the more you're protected. We need those guidances. It's so new. There's so many consequences. And um, I even have a client who works at the government, and she was just told to use it, but don't upload any private information. And that's at least something, but it's super unclear what apps they can use, what AIs they can use, how they can use it, right? And so the clearer it is, the better.
Absolutely. So, in the case of, let's say, a nonprofit that might have a board of directors that oversees them, should there be something getting implemented for the board level that also touches on AI? Like, do you think that there should be something that restricts how the board itself could utilize organizational information with AI?
Yeah, I mean, I was on a boot camp this week and they were uploading financial information to AI. And that to me was a red flag. So if it's not publicly available information, think a little bit and assess the risk of you are handing this over. And when we think of risk, we don't think of consequences, right? But if you're Google history is subpoenable, so is your ChatGPT, so is your AI history, so is your Claude history. And so any data that you are uploading can be used in a number of different ways. And how we're not sure right now how that data is being stored, what it's being used for, how it can be used by the courts. And so there's certain things that we need to think about. So yes, every level that goes higher and higher needs a standard, right? And how people are using it, an employee might be using it to write social media, but the board of directors might be using it to make financial decisions or to get funding or different things. And so we really need to look at, is this information going to hurt us in any way? Thinking through those consequences, super, super important. We've got a question. Would you recommend including the public facing policy in your email under your signature? Absolutely, you can. We had a job seeker accuse us of using AI when supporting their job search and not taking our time to individualize their jobs. Yeah, this was during a staff transition, and one employment coach was covering someone's caseload. We had to try to get the client on the phone to make the human connection and explain ourselves, where I could see this being prevented having a policy right now. Absolutely. The more transparent you are. Um, I was arguing with Google a couple of weeks ago, and I was trying to change something on my Google business profile. And I went through, the prompts and did the thing, and it still wouldn't do it. And so it said, email us. And I emailed them, and they answered. And the answer was, we don't know what the issue was, which I had clearly outlined. There is some clarity. I even provided official documentation. And my response to them was, stop using AI chatbot responses to deal with things. You need a human, right? If I couldn't get through your AI on your website, clearly I'm emailing because I need a human. And so the more that you can add it in places where people are looking, the better. And in this case, AI in job seeking is a hot topic. People are noticing that, chatbots or ATS is kicking a lot of resumes out. And so the trust is already lower. And so adding it to the places that it's going to increase trust is super important. And in this case, you're right, getting on the phone, saving the relationship, that's the right move, right? But people are going to assume that AI wrote it. That is an assumption that people are making right now. And there's some obvious tells. Sometimes I stop reading something because I've noticed it's AI. And so that transparency is going to become even more important, because I think this year the assumption is that AI did it. And
Now,
people
I
are,
do have a question for you
yeah.
also in relation to that point that people are making the assumption that AI is the one writing things.
Mhm.
In your last session, when we were talking about, uh, making your website a little bit more easier to be, crawled by answer engines,
Yeah.
we talked a lot about blog content and how blog content's coming back because it has lots of links. Um, is this something like in association with the policy, how you're saying, oh, identify when there's AI being used, would it make sense to also identify when it's a real person? So like, let's say when someone's writing a blog, this was written by a real person. Normally you'd say by whoever, but is there like, should people be implementing something to make it very obvious more than just saying by a specific person to say, hi, there's a real person behind this?
I mean, you can. I like the idea of adding personal stuff. I I have a sales background. I love storytelling. And where people are going to build trust, is in those personal details, in the things that AI can't replicate, in the sharing of wisdom and knowledge and lived experience, right? And so yes, you can say written by a real person, but we know that any kind of generic advice is going to be AI written. We're just going to assume that. And so the more that you can add those personal stories, the lessons, the lived experience, the more that's going to increase trust. So yes, you can use AI to write your blog, but that's going to decrease trust unless you add in those really. I'm just such a big fan of storytelling. There's nothing like it. People learn through storytelling. The brain remembers storytelling more than facts. And so that's where we're really going to start rebuilding that trust. So yes, you can add written by a human, written by a real person, and make it obvious, right? You can tell when we're getting smarter and smarter, but also AI is going to get smarter and smarter. And so it's going to the videos and the images are going to look more and more realistic, right? Yesterday, I asked ChatGPT what kind of haircut I should get this weekend, and it produced some very real looking haircuts for me, with my real face. And 6 months ago, I couldn't do that. It was obvious that it wasn't me. And so we are going to be I think skepticism is going to be up this year, and rightly so.
So, in association with policies, and you pointing out there that, things are becoming really realistic and it's hard to tell the difference, do you suspect that there's going to be consequences coming down the line for people who may not disclose in a policy or just in general about their use of AI?
Yeah, we're already seeing it, right? When you upload anything to Instagram, it's asking you to tag any AI generated content. Some is getting flagged because it's not being tagged. So there will be more and more consequences that you just can't upload certain things without tagging it. We're going to see that. But also, you'll see it in your business. If you're not transparent about how you use it, then clients will start spending their money elsewhere. And so that is going to just be a natural consequence that happens.
Perfect. And I think it's probably going to end up being a trickle down, right? You get the government saying this is what the uses need to be, and then the big corporations like Meta and, the big social media organizations are going to start having their own AI policies because the government now says you have to have one in place, and then that's going to trickle down and hopefully lead to some enforcement and having, some guidelines on what is okay to have and what isn't okay and the uses of AI. But I think that people being here and attending this session are ahead of the curve, and they're going to have something in place before the government says you have to.
Yeah. And it's true. That's how things trickle down, right? Privacy policies were created when Pipita and Castle came in, and it is a trickle down effect. AI is moving so fast that I think the government is really struggling. But I've also been looking at the legislation in the US. Different states are coming out with things, and the way that people are using AI, I was like, why would there be a law for that? And then I see how people are using certain things, and it's really concerning. And so being transparent will actually put you ahead of things. It will build trust, right? TELUS created their policy. It is right on their website. It's transparent. Brittany, as you said, if it's in your email signature and you're clear on what you use AI for and what you don't, that increases trust. You're then not trying to retain customers, you're building the relationship instead of putting out fires and trying to save it.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Elaine, for the session. I suspect that this might be something that comes back around in the fall, in the winter, coming back and revisiting this piece because, as you said, I think it's going to be a big thing that really explodes this year, and people are going to need to be jumping on a policy to prepare everybody for, the uses of AI and how their organization's using it and making sure that they're maintaining that trust with their customer base. So thank you so much. This is an awesome session. Um, I guess we're gonna just wait and see what comes down the line this year when it
Yeah.
comes to AI.
Brittany said, thank you so much. Definitely good start to brainstorm to get ahead of the game. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. I was already thinking, oh, I should be going back to my team and seeing, what should we be putting together to make sure that we're also ahead of the curve and we have things in place because I mean, maybe it's you're using it to write an email or you're using it to summarize things. I think it's, really important, obviously, to lay out those guidelines to make sure that people aren't uploading sensitive information. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for attending today. And just a reminder that a recording will be available after the session. It's going to be up on the RTO9's website, rto9.ca/resources. You're also going to get a copy in email if you're able to review the session. We really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Elaine, for your expertise in this. I know you said you're attending a course to get, a little bit more knowledge about AI. You're already so knowledgeable that I know who to go to when we have any questions. So thank you for sharing some of that insight with us. And we'll probably loop back around.
Yeah. So AB said, can we contact Elaine for our region? Yeah. I will put my contact information and I'm sure Meg sends that out as well.
Absolutely. I linked out to Elaine's website in
Perfect.
the follow-up email. So feel free to reach out, connect with Elaine. Um, oh, perfect. Yes. So feel free to reach out, ask questions. Elaine is honestly such a great resource when it comes to AI. So please feel free to reach out. And if you have any questions, if you need her email, if you forget it here or you forget the link, just let me know. I can always connect you. But thanks, Elaine, for another fantastic session. We'll probably see you again fall winter to recap things and bring things back. And I'm sure AI will be changing
Oh my God. There's so
dramatically
much
between now
stuff.
and then. So we'll have to be getting looped back in on what's new, what it can do, and how we can, best prepare our businesses and organizations for what's coming down the line.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you everyone for attending. Enjoy the rest of your day. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. But we'll let you go a little bit early so you can go in and enjoy that lovely sunshine that's out there today. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Elaine.
Bye.
Bye.